Hello and welcome to Blacks and Jews in Conversation. My name is Shannon Taylor. I'm the Executive Director, and I just came back from a full day at White Plains Pace Law School Adjunct, the Judicial Institute, for a conference on innovative strategies to nullify gang violence in our communities. This is how it looks. Beautiful brochure by the Franklin Williams Commission on Minorities, the Judicial Commission on Minorities. And what a full day program it had under the leadership of our member, Honorable Doris Lynn Cohen, who went to Israel with us under our sponsor, the America-Israel Friendship League, led by, of course, Bill Berger. And the speakers there were of all different persuasions and opinions, and quite exhilarating, and I've invited many of them to come on in the future. They covered the issue essentially of youth gang grouping and violence and rehabilitation, and how we're going to deal with that in the coming years. In fact, it started with various definitions of what is a gang. Some defined it as without the violence. Some defined it in more modern terms than traditional. And there are various programs in Suffolk County, in Riverhead, where they've had some success in reintroducing members, former gang members, into society, in the workforce, very productively. As far as the workshops, there were plenty. Breakout sessions. We had representatives of the Bronx, Nassau County, Westchester, and Albany District Attorney's Office. In fact, the District Attorney himself from Albany was present, David Suarez. And as you know, Blacks and Jews in Conversation has worked with the District Attorney offices of Manhattan, each of their offices, in past years, and perhaps we'll reinstitute these programs in the future. Our guest today is Professor Yaffa Berger, who has been with us for many, many years. I would say since we did our first programs in Brooklyn in Supreme Court with co-chairman William Thompson, Sr., and Judge Jerome Hornblass. Of course, we did not have the resources and initiative and wonderful organization of the Franklin Williams Commission at the time, but we did pretty good. And we inspired such as Yaffa Berger to stay on board with us up until today, and we're talking from the mid-90s. And one of our first conferences introduced the subject of AIDS education in the schools, and had Christopher Lynn, who was at that time the first openly gay member of the mayor's staff, who was a commissioner. He was Commissioner of Transportation at the time. And William Thompson, Jr. at that time was the president of the Board of Education. They were both present. There were 360 students in the federal court and received standing ovations for their joint initiatives on these issues. And, of course, we had the federal judges and state judges, which was also one of our initiatives. Yaffa Berger's initiative was to bring in students from the outreach alternative high schools, magnet high schools, and presently works with the New Vision high school systems. She recently came to the criminal court in Brooklyn with the Democracy High School. She'll give you the exact title. It was featured in an article in the Brooklyn Eagle when it toured in the morning the Supreme Court at 360 Adams Street, and then the criminal court at 120 Skirmerhorn. And with that, Professor Berger, who's also a teacher at Touro College on history and other subjects, as a dear friend, has worked with our co-chairman William Thompson and Bedford-Stuyvesant, is a short little lady with a wonderful sense of humor, and leads giants into re-education and then the workforce. I'll introduce her to you now. She should have been on this show from the beginning, but she decided she'd take her time reintroducing herself to me, and as soon as she did, we joined forces once again. Yaffa, hello.
Hi, how are you, Shannon?
I'm well, and I'm still here, so we're both still kicking. It's amazing. And tell me, tell me a little bit about your background, what brings you into the field of education, and what are you doing right now?
Okay. My original goal in life was to be a United States Supreme Court judge, and I was going to go to law school. And indeed, I was ready to go, but then then life does funny turns, and I ended up being an assistant administrator at a very young age in a hospital in Jerusalem, Israel during the Yom Kippur War, and came back then afterwards to the United States, got a master's in public administration from NYU, continued towards my PhD, and just have to finish up a few slight things, and then we'll get it if I get the time to do it. I actually fell into education because I was looking for a job. I had young family with children, and I wanted the type of job where I could work and yet be there for my children. And I started working in a Jewish parochial school, yeshiva, and which I liked, but financially I needed more. So I was convinced by some friends of mine to look into the New York City Board of Education. And I came from a background where I had an ultra-Orthodox Jewish background. I had never once been in a public school. I had never once dealt with, on a close basis, with anybody other than Jews. And here I ended up being referred to, and I got my license and went through the whole certification process, and I was placed in an alternative high school in Bedford-Stuyvesant, dealing with a whole group of people that I had never had any contact before. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into a class, and I took a look at the kids, and they looked at me, and I said, oh my gosh, this is not going to work out. But but something just pushed me, and I said, a number of people dared me. Everybody kept saying, oh, you're not going to make it out alive, you're not going to do it. And I just decided I had to prove everybody wrong. And it was tough. It was very tough. The first time I gave a homework assignment, and the kid said, yo, I left it in my crib. I said, you left what in your crib? Crib? I thought a crib was for a baby. But little by little, I grew to understand them. They grew to understand me. And now I'm in my 14th year. And I've now moved from an alternative school to a different, it's still a transfer high school, but it's a different type of school. And I'm coordinator of social studies and very excited in what we're doing. The school I'm in now is called Brooklyn Democracy Academy. It's part of the New Visions Network. These are groups of schools that the mayor has set up specifically to deal with a major problem, a serious problem in education today, probably as far as I'm concerned, New York City the most serious. We are graduating only 52% of high school seniors. Now, to have a success rate of 52%, heck, General Motors is going bankrupt with a higher one. We can't afford to have that. If we're looking in the minority community, we are looking for a graduation rate of maybe at most 43, 44%. And this is a crisis because kids who do not graduate, who do drop out, yes, they may go back for GED, but they also are statistically much more prone to crime, to gang violence, as you said, to teenage pregnancies, to all kinds of situations where literally they can't rise themselves up.
What is GED? I was at this conference today, and in this program in Suffolk County, in the Correctional Institute, they said we're here for GED, and a certain small percentage of the people are eligible for it, and then they end up being bakers, and they end up being butchers, and they end up having wonderful trades, and people, who said, these cutthroats are going to come in, and they're going to put on an apron, and they do. They said, these kids will do whatever you want them to do. If you give them the opportunity, they'll do whatever you want them to do. So what is GED?
Okay. The way the high school system works in New York City is that a kid goes into high school in 9th grade. Ideally, the way it's supposed to be, he's supposed to graduate by the time, in 4 years, go 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. However, the city will provide a high school education for a student up until they reach the age of 21. And believe it or not, I have students who are turning 21. At 21, they age out. That means that they no longer can get a regular Regents or academic diploma. Then they have an option. They can go to a GED. A GED is a general education diploma. It's basically geared for students over 18 who, for various reasons, could not do the regular high school. They go to classes, and at the end they take a test. It's a comprehensive examination, covers social studies, English, science, and math. If they pass it, they get what is called a high school equivalency diploma. Yes, they can get into a college, not necessarily an Ivy League one, but they can certainly get into a community college. Yes, they can get jobs. But the percentage of these kids who go for GED is not high. And we're trying to work out a program where they don't have to do the GED route, where they can get the regular high school program, they can graduate with a bona fide Regents diploma, where they can get into a good college or a good career. And the uniqueness of the school I'm in now is that we have examined very carefully what are the causes. What makes these kids drop out? What makes them go in?
Everybody can talk sociologically about all kinds of things, of why, what, and who. Have you heard of Bob DeSena, who formed the Council for Unity? Are you familiar with the Council for Unity? I know this worthy gentleman for some time. It's a very interesting organization of quite some success.
I've heard of it, but I'm not really familiar with what they do.
Well, his idea was similar to what you described, that there's many of these kids do not belong, or if they're there now, they'll be trapped and they can be rescued in this gang situation, prison gang, unending drain on their lives, their family, society, and financial resources. And that given an opportunity to find esteem and self-worth and their own innate talents in a meaningful way while incarcerated and serving time, that they can be brought back into society in what the correctional facility was originally meant to be, in one of at least its four facets, correcting the error in judgment and bringing back a full-fledged member of society. There were, of course, rehabilitation being one of the main factors. There was punitive, there was isolation, and so forth, but rehabilitation was always there, and this is a means of doing it because, as you said, people are not graduating by increasing numbers, and we are facing a future where we're losing our youth, our most precious resource. So you have an alternative avenue here. He has one, you have another. There are apparently many, many thoughts here. I'm not going to get into yet why or how, but tell us how your students enjoyed their session, their day that we all set up at the Supreme Court at Adams Street, and then at the criminal court. Did the two halves mesh, the Supreme and the criminal court? Were the students blasé? Were they excited? Do they want to come back? Do others want to follow? Did they find particular judges exciting? Did they find cases exciting? Tell me about their reaction, and as their overseer, what was yours?
Well, I can only tell you, we got to the court, It was a pouring day. It was probably the worst rain we had this
You always do that. You always bring me out to the rain.
And the kids came, and they weren't dressed warmly enough, and they were complaining and complaining and said, why we have to do this. We got to the courthouse. But first, we were met by Officer West, I think her name was, who was the...
This is the Supreme Court first
right,
in the morning.
Right, on Adams Street. And who took us inside, told us all about how the court system works. I was so proud because I teach, these are my students who I teach a course called Street Law, where they actually learn basic criminal law and family law and tort law, and these kids were popping. They knew the answers to every single question. A lot of them had experience with the juvenile, with the justice system. And then she took us to sit in on a case involving two defendants who were accused of illegal weapons. It was a felony case with illegal weapons. And one of the girls, one of my students who came, turned purple when she walked in. She recognized one of the defendants. It was her boyfriend's cousin. So she looked at me, and I gave her a look like, make believe you don't know anything. And he looked at her and smiled. Anyway, they sat down. They were mesmerized, listening to the case, listening to the police officer who had arrested them was being cross-examined. And when we finally had to leave, I mean, those kids were like, they were like overwhelmed. They said, hey, wait a minute, but what? But he was wrong in that. Leading question, I mean, the kids were really outstanding. Then we walked to the local McDonald's, which was not the local McDonald's, which is about a mile away. And by then we were all soaked and sick and everything, and I treated them to lunch because I felt they deserved it.
Why do they deserve to be treated? Doesn't the school system provide lunch on these trips?
Nope.
Doesn't the school system don't you have a budget for this kind of a thing? Why are you going to treat me for lunch? I've treated you to too many lunches, and I don't take you to McDonald's when you have lunch with me.
Okay, anyway, we then went to the court on the Skirmahorn Street, and those kids, first of all, meeting Judge Miller was a tremendous...
We're now talking in Brooklyn. Judge Bill Miller, who is the supervising judge of the criminal court for Kings County and Staten Island and Red Hook.
It was interesting. The kids were very impressed by him, except one kid refused to go into the courtroom. And then he told me afterwards, he was the judge at this kid's arraignment. He was arraigned for some misdemeanor charge, and he was a judge, so he didn't want to meet him again. But they found the trip fascinating. We went to see the holding pens, and the court officer, I don't remember his name, who guided us was tremendous. And Shannon, they thought you were adorable.
Who thought I was adorable?
All the
what
girls.
Names?
All the girls.
How many girls were there?
We had a lot of girls.
Why didn't you tell me at the time? What are you telling me now for?
Anyway, when we came back, and the kids went ahead and they debriefed.
I want to hear more about the briefing of the adorable there.
When they debriefed, they said that the trip, they learned so much, even though they knew things, but looking at it from a different perspective and seeing it, first of all, it made a lot of the kids interested in going into a law career, whether it's law enforcement or any kind of legal career. And secondly, they just found the whole thing fascinating. You know what they were impressed with? The stenographer who earns close to $200,000 a year.
Well, listen, they work very hard. They have to take down every word. People who talk like me and worse. And
they were fascinated.
And they work, not just in the courthouse, but they have transcripts that are ordered for defense counsel and so forth. They have to know different languages. It's shorthand. It's not an easy life. And coming from many years of private practice, I know this. But tell me more about. You had a companion with you. There was a guidance counselor. What was her reaction?
We had a guidance counselor, Miss Shirley Vaughn, who's a social worker. The guidance counselors in our school are actually advocate counselors who work for the Jewish Child Care Association, which is our partnering organization. We work with them. the DOE does the educational aspect, and JCCA does the support network. And she was fascinated also. She kept saying that she had been on trips and she never had such a trip where the kids learned so much. And I must say, their behavior was impeccable. You would have thought that they came from a fancy private schools and not from a transfer school in Brownsville.
Well, first of all, the students at fancy private schools or Stuyvesant and so on are not impeccable. And I have always said throughout the years that having been at all the private schools and all the other schools and Stuyvesants and so on, and been very happy to be there and privileged to be there, I do not find the students impeccable. The type of school does not dictate the conduct of the student. The interest in what is being done and presented dictates the conduct of the student, and the discipline that is maintained is dependent on the presenter, the teacher, and so forth. Now, first of all, you're in a courthouse, and second of all, we always maintain discipline, Yaffa, did we not?
100%.
And we always maintain interest. How many programs we've done? Countless. Do you ever remember one incident with hundreds and hundreds
None.
of students?
None.
With countless programs where there was not an interest and a maintenance of discipline.
No, never, never. And Shannon, we've worked together many years. There were times I took 40 kids by myself, which is asking for trouble, and yet perfect. The judges...
And we both shared the same philosophy on this. There were many people who said that we were all taking risks, but we both had the same faith in the students. We had the same faith in the judges and the court officers and in the students. And we had court officers in Brooklyn, did we not, at the criminal court? And how did they react to the court officer who provided the tour?
Oh, they loved him. They loved him. They kept asking him, could he come as a guest speaker? In fact, one of the things I'd like to work out in the early spring term is to get him to come and to discuss what it's like. The kids want to know, how do they become a court officer? That's what the question was. They were very career-oriented. I found the big question, how do you become a court officer? Do you really, if you go to a community college, can you become a lawyer? Does it really take that long? What about a paralegal? These kids were, they were so interested in the professional aspect. What do I need to study in college? I mean, I don't think these kids ever had an interest in this before.
Well, it's a tribute to the judges and the officers and yourself and Ms. Vaughn that you have the initiative to present this, because first of all, you say you're dealing with students who are given a second chance at graduation. Then you're dealing with a long day from, I don't know when, 7 in the morning until 4. Then you're dealing with an atmosphere where defendants go flying left and right, and the prisoners are being escorted, and people have been there before, seen relatives there before, see friends there, they're going there. And in spite of all this, and it's an optional program, in spite of all this, they're interested, they're fascinated, they're courteous, they're awed, they want to be involved, they have good police society relations, they have one-to-one with the judge. Judge Miller stepped down from the bench to talk with them, so did the Supreme Court, I imagine, so did Judge Zizou in the morning, and they witnessed awesome types of cases. For instance, they heard about some baby who was just killed, and did they follow up in the paper? I believe
you bet. In fact, I gave them an assignment on it. They had a homework assignment, and this was one of the few homework assignments where everybody turned it in.
And what was it about?
I asked them to review the details of the case. They had to go through they had to go through the newspapers, and based upon, now that they've seen the arraignment and everything, did they agree with the judge's decision, with the arraignment? And many of them didn't. Many of them did, but they were so involved, and it got them to write, it got them to think, analytical skills, critical thinking skills, and they now have a much better idea of what the judicial system really is. And Shannon, it's due to you. You started it. You and Willie and Jerry, you guys made it happen.
I was directed to do it by my superiors, by Judge Thompson and Judge Hornblass and Judge Lou Douglas, who was the chair of the Franklin Williams Commission, that we came from where I was today, and by Bill Etheridge, the chief clerk for the criminal court of the city, and by Doris Lynn Cohen, and by Judge Dowling, and Yvonne Lewis, and so on. And I am simply the facilitator. The credit goes to the judges who are able to talk with the students, and you who are able to teach them. And the rest comes from what the message was about gangs, and the message is in the courts, and the message should be in the schools, or from you, that the students today, if properly approached, can be approached in such a way that we can produce a resource instead of on an unending drain and on the treasury and on their own spirit. We can enliven them, and we can have a future from them, and instead of having an unending repetition of loss and pity and tragedy and crime. For instance, I saw my friend Tony LoBianco do LaGuardia in a church in the 70s. It's a dream of mine to see him do LaGuardia. And LaGuardia was one of the great mayors of the city who said those who love New York will do everything possible to bring this city surviving into the next decade. And isn't that what these programs are about, Yaffa?
100%, 100%. But Shannon, remember, as my Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message, and you were the medium, and you got the message out. Everybody had ideas, but you did the elbow work, or like my mother says, you had the elbow grease.
Well, you did contact me, and I said I only need a few weeks to do any of these things, because they fall right into gear. We did this in very short order, didn't we?
Right, very fast.
And I remember you said, is it possible? And I said the judges are waiting. Judge Miller wanted to do it immediately, and the captain, the new captain at Skirmerhorn, put it right into play. I must say everybody is as wonderful as can be. Yaffa, we have 1 minute left. Reflections, are they coming back? Are you doing more tours?
Well, I can tell you that I'm going to call Officer West, and I want to arrange something for probably the beginning of February.
Always in the cold and the snow, always giving me...
It's got to be after Regents.
I want to remind our viewers about Disability Awareness Month coming up. I was just at Willie Thompson Jr.'s tribute to our veterans, and of course we passed Veterans Day in tribute to our soldiers serving all the time. My father was a veteran in the French Resistance and the American Army in the Second World War, and Disability Awareness Month is celebrated November 19th with the Controller. Thank you, Yaffa Berger, and congratulations, and a wonderful week ahead. Come with us next week for our next guest on Estates, Blacks and Jews.
Thank you.